Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Doctor Who Christmas/holiday special, The Church on Ruby Road. Great special, great episode in general. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So we get our first introduction to the newest companion, Ruby, which I hadn't looked into things, so I didn't realize not only the character but also the actress who plays Ruby, her name is Millie Gibson, are 19. I was like, whoa. I was like, so that makes you like the youngest companion. I even looked it up to confirm it. It seems like she is the youngest companion in Doctor Who history. I thought was so interesting. I was wondering if that was almost meant to be like a parallel, because I mean, I think both Shooty and Matt have the record, because I think Matt at the time, because he was 29 when he was initially, Matt Smith was initially 29 when he was originally cast, if I'm not mistaken, as the Doctor. So at that time he was the youngest, but I think Shooty Gatwell was 29 when he was initially cast too. I think I remember that news coming out too, so maybe it's supposed to be a parallel in that same capacity, because everyone else is like, well, at least in the newer series, are probably anywhere in the like 30s or 40s typically. I think I'd probably say like Tennant, Smith, with the exception of Capaldi, and even Jodie Whittaker, were all in their 30s when they were, well, like I said, with the exception of Matt Smith, but like, I think Tennant and Jodie Whittaker were in their 30s when they were initially cast. But either way, tangents and all that aside, I didn't even think about the parallels, and I like for one, I like Ruby's personality. When we're introduced to her, she's a part of this TV show that's about finding your biological parents, because she was adopted. She's not even the first one of the companions to be adopted. Is she? Actually, I'm blanking. I'm like, am I conflating that with a different storyline? Wasn't there another companion that had like, was adopted? Was it Bill? Was Bill adopted? I don't remember now. I might be completely wrong. Do excuse me for my stupidity, but I'm like, I might be conflating it with a different storyline, because I'm like, someone being adopted sounds so familiar storyline wise, and I just can't remember if it was Doctor Who or if I'm conflating it with something else. Ruby might be the first adopted companion, but like, I could have sworn someone else was too. But like I said, maybe I'm being stupid. I mean, there's a very strong possibility of that. I'm gonna move past that, but I'm like, I could have sworn someone else in Doctor Who history, at least of the Doctor Who history that I'm aware of, was adopted. We'll get to the Doctor and everything, but yeah, when we're introduced to Ruby, she's being like, got a large string of bad luck. But I love the Doctor's kind of weaving in and out of her life over the course of like the next 3 weeks, which I love that she's like at a club partying, and then he's on the dance floor wearing a kilt and everything, breaking it down. Because I had no idea Ncuti Gatwa is Rwandan and Scottish. Okay. I remember Scottish, but I couldn't remember. I wasn't for sure, but yeah, he's Rwandan and Scottish. But just kind of partying up on the dance floor. It's like, it feels like just like personality wise, because I mean, we only got a little taste of him in the 60th anniversary, the final 60th anniversary special, The Giggle. But you know, and obviously that was a very serious situation, so now we get to see him kind of cut loose, kind of have more of his personality shine through in this capacity too, considering the circumstances. And he seems like he's going to be a wild, his Doctor seems like he's going to have like a wild personality. And I mean, I think this show does such a good job when you are able to like really capture the essence, like in just one episode, like the chemistry between the Doctor and the companion and or companions, you know, depending on the Doctor's circumstances. There being, you know, multiple companions, but I really like Ncuti Gatwa and Millie's chemistry together. They bounce off each other really well, and just like obviously it's reflected even in the characters, because the characters gel together so well too. But it was so interesting because I feel like the Doctor typically is pretty early, like his story, it's like kind of a little separated from hers, because like he's intervening in her life, but he's popping in, but he's not really there. Whereas I feel like more often than not, like the Doctor and the companion, when they first meet, are pretty interwoven together, where it's like, oh, it's kind of like a parallel thing, but this Doctor's kind of off doing his own thing, but also keeping an eye on Ruby, because he knows there's something else going on here. So, but we get introduced to Ruby's circumstances. She lives with her adopted mom, Carla, and Carla's mom, Sherry. like I brought up, she's adopted, and it's actually really beautiful when we see later on, like her mom's adopted, fostered a lot of kids over the years, but there's only one she's ever adopted, and that's Ruby. She actually keeps in touch with a good chunk of the kids that she fostered over years, has pictures of them, get to see, like, check in and see where their lives are, and it's actually really beautiful. And she ends up kind of fostering another one, Lulu Bell, which I love that they hated the name, but the doctor loved it, calling it brilliant. It was actually very heartbreaking when Ruby got the call, like, hey, we can't find anything about your parents. I'm like, that is weird. Not anything, no blood samples or anything, no family at all, nothing matches my genetic makeup anywhere out there in the world DNA wise. That's very heartbreaking, because she was, it's like, right, this has helped so many people, because even the lady that was in charge of it's like, yeah, like, she said it happens from time to time, but I'm like, but for nothing to be found seems, because even Ruby's like, don't you think that's kind of weird that nothing came up? And I think that's going to be the crux of Ruby's story, as we kind of, I mean, everyone has their thing, like Clara being the impossible child. Obviously Amy and Rory's circumstances, what their story like ends up developing into, and just like, cause I'm trying to think, I mean, because a lot of people's lives start off normal and then they get mixed up in with the doctor, but then you have people like Clara and even Amy and Rory that even before they met the doctor, their lives were intertwined with the doctor to some shape or form. Like there was something kind of special already beforehand, But I mean, because of the timey-wiminess of it all, it's like, well, which came first, the chicken or the egg when it comes to the whole how connected the doctor is with Amy and Rory, the river song of it all. So, but like Clara was already kind of the impossible girl and everything, so that's once again timey-wiminess and stuff, like which came first and stuff like that. But it's still just the fact is that the doctor would meet her, and I didn't even really think, like, it wasn't until we started really getting into that conversation I was like, oh, that is interesting, because the doctor's literally in the same boat of like, yeah, I was adopted too, and it's like, you were? It's like, yeah, I only found out about it recently. I think that's what really kind of cut him to his core, because Ruby's like, oh, so what about your family? He's like, I don't have anyone. It's like, yeah, the Gallifreyans, circumstances being what they are, but also he is very much in the same boat as Ruby. He doesn't know where he comes from. He has an idea, but even then, there's just so many question marks. And I was like, that now interesting, tying that all in together. Once again, I brought this up in the previous reviews of how I know some people don't like the Timeless Child storyline. I do, but it seems like we are still leaning into that. Maybe Russell T. Davies will clean it up in a way that'll make it so that we're not going to completely retcon it, but we're going to retcon it in the regards of we're going to add more context and, flush things out in a way that maybe people will be more accepting of that storyline beat. Maybe that's the direction, because they're not undoing it. It's still a thing, but once again, it's just retconning in regards of adding more context. I don't know if there's a word for that. Because there's retconning is like you completely change something, but that's like when you add context to it, it's still retconning, but it's a newfangled way of doing retconning. Like the one that I always think of is Scarlet Witch. WandaVision added so much context to some of Wanda's backstory that we had gotten in Age of Ultron. So it's like it's retcon, but really you're just adding more context. That's where I'm like, that's where it's like, is it really retconning? It kind of is and kind of isn't. That's why I feel like the Timeless Child storyline is going to kind of end up being in that capacity. But either way, Ruby's new little foster sister, Lulu Bell, ends up getting kidnapped by goblins who are the ones causing all the issues in her life. I wonder, does she have a fear of heights? Because the moment she got up on the house, she was kind of, I mean, to be fair, you're getting pulled up on a ladder that's coming down from the sky. You're going to feel a certain way, but it didn't seem like it stemmed from like a fear of heights, which, hey, I'm there with you. I have a severe fear of heights. But she's going up, and I love that the doctor's running on the roof. Like, what are you doing? Like, who sees a ladder coming down from the sky and is like, oh, let me jump on that and see where this goes. Hey, babe? And she's like, they've got a baby, so like he jumps. He's created a new invention. He's got these gloves, the super gloves as they call them, and it basically transfers all mass and mavity, which I love that we're still keeping that. This is the second episode away from it, because that was the Wild Blue Yonder special, and we're still keeping the mavity thing. I'm like, are we ever going to correct that in this continuity? Probably not. Maybe at some point they'll correct that, maybe not. I don't know. I'm curious to see how long they keep up with that bit. But it's neat how that glove works. It's like, hey, I can make it so that I'm light as a feather because all the mass and everything goes into his head. Because he's like, right, I'm used to hanging from stuff, so I decided like, oh, you hang for a long time, it tires you out, you're holding on, so it's like it makes it easier. All the mass and weight is put on your arm, and your body feels light, so your body's not feeling as strange, your muscles aren't feeling as strange, but it can also put all that heaviness in the glove and make you like extremely heavy. So those are probably going to be plot devices as we go forward. It is always interesting too, the Sonic of it all. I'd probably say the one we had gotten that was probably the weirdest one up to this point was, well, didn't Tenet, not Tenet, didn't Smith, like Matt Smith, Doctor, didn't he turn his sonic screwdriver into a fez? Because he went through his fez phase for a little bit. Because I know Capaldi's turned his into shades at one point in time. Because the shade ones comes to my mind immediately, but I could have sworn for a while, did Matt Smith's Doctor have like a fez sonic screwdriver? Let me know in the comments down below. I feel like I remember that. I remember the fez phase, but I feel like it was also a screwdriver, a sonic. But anyway, I don't know what you'd even call that device. It kind of reminds me, it kind of looks like a remote, interestingly enough. So keep still calling it a sonic screwdriver, but it's like, even corrected himself at one point. It's like, okay, it's the sonic. Which I also love this little bit when he was trying to protect Ruby from that falling snowman and that lady was pushing that carriage. And I love that he was chastising her like, it's midnight and you're out here. And she's like, these are my shopping presents. And Shooty was almost like, oh, sorry. Didn't even mean to. And she was almost like, how rude of you making it. Because she was like, who are you out? Why are you out walking in the middle of the night with like your baby or whatever? It's like, yeah, making assumptions. I love it. I also I'm curious to see if anything comes about because of that police officer he met too, where it's like, oh, she's gonna say yes. It's like, what? Well, this ping from the Sonic tells me that you have like a diamond ring on you, and most likely you're gonna propose. And if you like, they close on Tuesday because of the time frame, but it's like if you had to get it so quickly, that means like this is someone you're really in love with, and she's gonna say yes. So, and he didn't bat an eye when like, hey, here's the TARDIS flashing away. He's like, hey, she's gonna say yes. I wonder, is that just kind of a bit? But it feels like you never know. Some things can seem like they're not important, but they could end up being super relevant later on. We'll see if that ends up being a thing. But anyway, circling back to the main plot of it all, the Doctor is helping Ruby try and stop the goblins because they plan on eating the baby. Because typically they don't try to kill people. The reason why they've been giving her bad luck, because I love like the explanation about it, and because I love the Doctor getting excited about it, because for him it's like, dude, I'm speaking a new language now. It's luck. And I even love that breakdown of like, what is luck if not another form of accident? Like two things like happening and colliding. It's just, luck has this positive connotation to it. So accidents had the negative connotation to it, but luck is an accident too. I was like, that's actually a really interesting way, a very like optimistic perspective on it. But it's like, yeah, like luck is just accidents happening, just a more positive accident. That threw me for a loop. I was like, oh, that is kind of interesting. Like luck is just two things accidentally happening, and there being is considered good luck if you. Well, I mean, I guess that's just the thing in general. Luck in general is accidents. Bad luck means like, oh, two things collided and created a bad situation. Good luck is just an accident happening and good things happening. So it's fascinating. But yeah, he's like understanding luck as a language now, and it turns out that the goblins are time, waivers? Is that what you call them, or riders? That basically they ride the wave of time, and basically they found coincidence because, hey, Ruby has the same birthday as Lulu Bell, so it's like, okay, so they found a coincidence. They went back about 3 weeks and caused all this bad luck around Ruby so that it would build up until this date. Because for them, the way the Doctor explained it was like, basically, you go your entire day not having any bad luck. It's an ordinary day, nothing special. But a whole bunch of string of bad luck, it ties you to that day. It kind of creates this, like, I don't know how he described it. It was almost like it leaves an imprint on that day when you have so much. It kind of almost leaves like a time signature. Not time signature. That's me using the word, but it like puts a stamp on that day, and you have back-to-back days because she's been having it for weeks. That is all this bad luck has kind of been building up. I even love there's this line later on. It's like, wait, are they responsible for all bad luck? And even the doctor's like, maybe. Like, are they in general responsible for all bad luck in general, all across the board? Thought that was just kind of interesting. I also love that Ruby made the mistake of calling them time travelers. He's like, whoa, 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 they're not time travelers. Okay, he's like, time travelers are great. They're cool. They're like, they're awesome. I was like, I love how offended he got. He's like, don't put me in this state. I mean, obviously, because at the time she didn't know he was a time traveler, but I love how offended he got. He's like, no, no, no. They're not time travelers at all. Like, don't even get twisted. Like, time travelers are cool and great and awesome in every possible way. I was like, I love how defensive he got about that. I also love that we got a musical segment, which I was not expecting. Once again, I've come to love musical segments and stuff. I know that's a hit and miss for some people, but I've come to appreciate musicals more and more. I haven't watched many in, but I've watched more because they typically get incorporated into episodes. Obviously, I wouldn't even call this a full musical episode. We wouldn't even call it a musical. It's just a music segment in the episode, which was pretty dope. Actually, I looked it up. The singer for that, her name is Christina Rotondo. She even says it in her Instagram. It says, yes, I'm the Goblin Queen for at BBC Doctor Who, which I was like, oh, that's so cool. Because she's probably like, yeah, a lot of people probably are like looking her up now. I don't think I've ever heard her before. She sounded like she had her voice sounded familiar. That's why I was almost curious if it was someone I recognized. I don't think I'm familiar with her. But either way, that's super cool and super dope. That whole singing song, they're even seasoning Lulu Bell. It's just like, oh boy, that's all kinds of twisted. And it's like the Goblin King's going to eat the baby. And it's like, right, they're like making a whole, like I said, musical segment out of it. It's like, because at one point I think Ruby was like, is that a band I'm hearing? And I was not expecting a musical number. I also love that the doctor walked away from the situation learning how to speak the language of ropes, ended up figuring out how to open a door, even finding a, God, what did he call? Oh, essentially what is the equivalency of an air vent. I didn't talk about it either, but I love that they're like, how they get around as a flying ship. Feels very like, Stardust, the movie. I've never read the book, but very Stardust. Kind of gives me like specifically like Final Fantasy vibes, like some classic Final Fantasy. I don't want to delineate it just as that, but like the more Final Fantasies that are set in like more medieval times, like a kind of give me FF9 vibes, like ship design wise and stuff like that. But either way, I even love that Ruby and the Doctor got mixed in on the singing portion, so they end up like weighing themselves down as they like, the Doctor figured out like the crux like rope to pull to kind of undo the knots that ended up leading to, hey, let's drop down and land back at Ruby's place. It's like Lulu Bell's fine, everything's great. I even love how like the Doctor is with Cherry, Ruby's grandmother, and I'm like, you're a bit of a flirt, aren't you? I was like, dude, like Shooty Gatwa's like got like, God, I feel like such a fucking boomer saying this, but the Riz, cringe, cringe. I should never say the word Riz. I sound so cringe saying that. Anyway, it's just like he has so much charisma. Most of the Doctors have like their own like charisma, has their own like, their charm to them. I'd say the only one that does it is Capaldi, but him being kind of curmudgeon-y is kind of his charm in a way. But yeah, like he seems like he's gonna be like very charismatic as a Doctor, which like I said, it's part of the role of being the Doctor, is being kind of like, I mean, some Doctors are more quirky than charismatic, but their quirkiness, like I'd say Jodie's Doctor is quirky, I'd say Matt Smith's is quirky, so is Tennant's, but he walks that line of charisma and quirkiness, whereas the others do as well, but it's just their quirkiness ends up being the crux of their charisma, where I feel like Shooty's is just like, nah, just oozing charisma. But it's like, yeah, we gotta bad luck proof this place. It feels almost poetic because it's almost like baby proofing a house. It was almost like that, but it's like for bad luck. And it's like, oh my God, we left the baby alone. How could you leave the baby alone? And he's like, you left the baby alone too. She's like, yeah, but don't. And they're like hiding stuff from her mom of like, yeah, let's not tell mom about all of this. But yeah, we got into it a little bit about the Doctor. And it was, like I said, I think that's such a beautiful connection to kind of draw a parallel between Ruby and the Doctor in that regard, especially when the Doctor still has not figured it out. It's still a fresh enough wound, this whole timeless child stuff, and to meet this new companion who's kind of in the same boat as you, not knowing who they are. Because yes, she has a great life, but it's always going to be a little bit of that question of, well, where did I come from? Who am I? We all want that. For some of us, we're very fortunate to have those answers, to know where we came from, and we are able to look into it. But when those answers elude you, it is like, yeah, you know yourself, but there's always going to be a part of yourself you'll never know. I mean, obviously, it's like, once again, it plays wildly in with the doctor's story of, as I described it previously, of like as someone who's constantly changing their face all the time, it fits poetically to be like, yeah, I have unbeknownst to me, I thought I knew for sure who I was, and now it's led to the biggest giant identity crisis of all time. And Ruby's in that same boat. Like I said, I think Ruby's circumstances are going to be special. But yeah, the goblins did not give up so quickly, because once again, coincidence started stacking up, because it's like, oh, you were adopted, so was Ruby. Oh, that's so crazy. Coincidence. Oh, and Clara telling baby Lulubelle, it's like, oh, I could just eat you up. It's like, what a coincidence. And now it's starting to like turn it. It's like, oh boy, the goblins are going to get drawn back by all this coincidence, because it's going to seem tasty to them. But instead of going after Lulubelle, because they already put it in a work, and just because Lulubelle, they failed to get Lulubelle, but it brought Ruby in, and I think the coincidence around her like seems so appetizing that it's like, well, let's ride the time wave. And instead of going after Lulubelle, they now decided to go after Ruby. They went back in time to get her as a baby, and so everything's undone. The entire house changes, and it's so heartbreaking too, because we just had that scene where Clara like was there to console her daughter. It's like, it's okay. I'm kind of glad you didn't find your mom, because I didn't want to share you, because you're mine and you'll always be mine. Because Cara's like, yeah, I'm glad that I have you. I keep calling her Clara. Cara. Is it Clara? I'm butchering it now because I keep going back and forth, because the companion Clara, Jenna Coleman, and now I'm just like messing up Ruby's mom's name. But it's like they're both fortunate. Like, I don't know what my life would be like without you. And then hard cut to her life without it. Like, yeah, she's taking care of Lulubelle, but it ends up being a thing of she only like fosters children just to put her name on the list. She doesn't really care about it. It's just me taking them in just for the purposes of making a little bit of money. She lives here with her mom. Like, her and her mom don't seem they have a good relationship. It's like Ruby ended up changing her life so much for the best. It wasn't, like I said, it wasn't just a great thing for Ruby. It was also a great thing for her mom. Because I guess Ruby was the first person she ended up, like, maybe she did kind of foster kids before Ruby, but Ruby in her life kind of opened her world even more. So that's why she fostered so many. Because, like, Ruby was like, Lulubelle's like the 33rd kid that she's fostered. And so I don't know if Ruby was the first one she fostered before adopting her, but it does seem like Ruby is what jump started everything. So I'm assuming maybe she was the first, and then she just like fostered others over the years, but ended up only adopting Ruby. The others are out there in the world, having lives of their own. And it's just kind of sad that like seeing how like that place that was so bright and full of life is now like a dull color. There's no lights on the wall. Like, it's like all the joy from this place was sapped away. And it's just that moment where she's like, right, why would I adopt a kid? Like, kids, they're kind of a nuisance. This one right here, Lulubelle's annoying too. Ruin my Christmas. Like, my mom would fall asleep by 3 o'clock, and so I'd have this time to myself, kind of ruining my Christmas day. And it's like, and the doctor's like, why are you crying? She's like, I don't know why. She's like, why are you crying? Because for him, it just hits him like this life that was turned upside down, this beautiful life, this person who is such a loving mom, like who she is without her daughter, like how much of an impact Ruby had on her. It's like, not only Ruby's going, like, once again, she never like kept a good, like, she fostered kids from time to time, sure. And she even says like 5 or 6. So she never foster kids to the extent that she did with Ruby in her life, but also she never kept contact. It's just like, hey, I do it every once in a while. It's just a money thing. I don't really care about the kids. But it's like, even then, like, even though to some level Ruby had left an imprint, that even though she didn't exist in this, there was some part of her that was missing it. Like, Ruby still, like, there was some imprint of Ruby still somewhere deep inside of her that she felt it when she said, like, oh, I don't care about kids or whatever. Like, they ruin, But maybe it's also like, no, maybe that doesn't necessarily have to fully attribute to Ruby. Maybe it could just simply be a thing of, no, it comes down to she always felt that emptiness and she just kind of was in denial about it, and Ruby helped her kind of face that denial and just eventually like spread love around. So, but I think especially, I think maybe it's seeing all that taken away and what that meant, like so many lives like rearranged and messed with because of the goblins. So he goes back in time because he figures out what they did, and he ends up going back to the day that Ruby was found at the church, and ends up going up to the ship. There's only like a little percentage left in the gloves, and he uses the mask to bring it down. I mean, the Doctor has from time to time, does not always go for killing, but will. It's interesting how we kind of shy away from that. It's almost like a Green Arrow situation, like in the show Arrow. It's like, are we still killing people, or are we just kind of incapacitating people? It seems like we're back to killing people now. You know, like the Doctor does. I guess it depends on the circumstances, but I think, I don't know, you definitely straight up murdered that Goblin King, brought down the entire ship, and it crashed and pierced the top of the church, killing him, and that ended up undoing everything. Well, they end up, I guess, maybe not dying, but what kept them tethered to this wave of time ended up, like, I don't know if they're just dead or just they got, because their ship disappeared too. I guess the Goblin King was the only thing tethering them to this wave of time, and now that he's injured or dead, it just removed, because maybe he's the only thing that gave them life, because it just ship and everything disappeared. So it seems like he's the crux of all of that. Saved baby Ruby and returned her, and in that moment, just like him happy to go. And what I thought was so interesting is, in that moment, the Doctor stops and he sees Ruby's mom walk away. I think for him, he could have gone, but he probably was like, no, it's not my business to look into. That's for Ruby to find out, you know, on her own. And it's not my business to kind of get mixed up in someone's family business like that. But I think that story is going to come full circle. That's probably going to be something we tackle nearing the end of the next season. But that thread, because they go out of their way not to show Ruby's mom, and especially because there's no DNA or anything to let Ruby know where she comes from. It's like, that's definitely a major story beat, and I'm curious to see where that turns out. But I love when he was so excited to see Ruby back. He picked her up, and I'm like, I love their chemistry together. He's like, yeah, they went back in time, but I stopped them. You were a baby. And all of that, it's when Ruby was finally piecing together, like, wait, what did he say? He went back in time. She's like, oh my God. He said he hung out with Houdini. What was Houdini in the 1920s? Oh my gosh, she finally pieced it together. He's a time traveler. So he also went back in time to save, was it Davina McCall from getting... Well, that's the timey-wiminess of it at all. Does that mean he always goes back in time to save her? Because, I mean, to be fair, we cut away from it, so it's like, did she get hurt? Because she had a whole bunch of bad luck. They were doing that to her just to kind of mess with her in particular. Because they were just having fun. But I wonder, it's probably a thing of the Doctor always went back in time and saved her type of thing. So, you know, the Ouroboros of it all. I also looked into it, had no idea until I saw the credits. I was like, oh, Davina McCall playing Davina McCall. She's like a host in real life. I don't think the show that she's hosting in this show is real. I mean, I could be mistaken. But, like, she's just playing herself, which I was like, oh, interesting. I had no idea. That's why he made such a point of, like, oh, yeah, you're welcome, Davina McCall. Because she's like, oh, my God, you saved my life. And it's like, so that's what that was really all about. So that was probably kind of like a celeb kind of cameo in a way. I guess that's what that's kind of supposed to be. And what also drew my attention, I thought was so interesting, was Miss Floods. I was like, okay, we're bringing her back. Because at first, when he went back in time to save a young infant Ruby, she was there carrying groceries, and she saw the TARDIS disappear, and she dropped the bags. But then she was so casually talking to him, being like, oh, look at you, young man. Like, she was just talking to him casually, despite everything. I was like, what's going on there? I was like, that's interesting. And she even pointed, when Ruby went outside, she pointed Ruby towards the TARDIS and everything. It's like, go ahead, like, you should go on in, like, go take a ride or whatever. She was kind of pushing her towards. I was like, who are you? I was like, you're not supposed to be like an old Ruby, are you? Like, you're connected in some shape or form. Because I looked into it, spoiler alert, like, she's going to be in the next season, but in what capacity, I have no idea. Because I looked her up because I was curious. Like, the actress who plays her name is Anita Dobson, I believe. Yes. And because I was curious, I'm like, is she an old companion or something? Because The doctor would have. He always recognizes a companion, so I was like, it can't be someone he's ever met before. Then I mean, maybe once again it's out of time where it's like, yeah, she's met him before, but he hasn't met her yet, type of situation. But I was like, threw me for a loop, and she knew exactly what she was like. Oh, a TARDIS. But I'm like, why'd you have that reaction in that other time frame when they had taken Ruby? She had dropped. Does that mean something different happens this time? Because in a time where Ruby was, because I was like, no, because she's not an older Ruby, because she was in the time that Ruby was taken, and in that time frame, present day, she was still there. So she's definitely not an older Ruby, but maybe it's implying like Ruby existing changed the course of her life in some shape or form, because maybe this has something to do with Ruby's journey with the Doctor, that they crossed paths, and like maybe her when she was younger, or at some point in time for her to recognize a TARDIS. It could also be like she saw it as a police box but didn't immediately recognize it as a TARDIS. I mean, they can be anything, but maybe that's why she dropped the bag, because she was like, oh my god, it's a TARDIS. You know, like, just what her circumstances is, I have no idea what to make of that. Like I said, her calmness about the TARDIS, because even the other guy came over like, oh my god, Miss Floyd, did you see that? That thing disappeared. And she's like, and he's like, oh yeah, like, come on, enjoy Christmas, you know. I was like, because it seems so, because she was very like, all kind of humbuggish towards that neighbor, Abdul. She was kind of like that towards him at the beginning of the earlier parts of the episode, and I don't know what that's supposed to mean. That's definitely, like I said, spoiler alert, she's going to be in the next season in some capacity. In what capacity, I have no idea, but I'm curious what that is, because that, like I said, that felt like setup, but I wasn't sure what that was. Once again, timey-wiminess of like things happening out of order. Seems like that's what that was. But I mean, in general, this just a fun episode. Great, like, real proper introduction to, even more of an introduction for Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor, and also our new companion, Ruby. And obviously the complicated nature of time travel, which you'll find out soon enough of. Yeah, you don't always go back the way at the time frame you want. It's like the Doctor today, like, oh, you'll be like you've been going for like a few hours or like a few minutes. Oh, actually, it's been a couple days. It's like that always happens. It always happens. Every companion's had to go through the whole phase of that whole situation. So I was also surprised by the ending credits saying like, we're getting Doctor Who the next season a lot sooner than I thought we were. I could have sworn I was reading something saying we weren't going to get the new season until 2025. This is saying the next season starts in spring of 24. I was like, interesting. I guess like maybe it was like a typo, or maybe they pushed up the date, because I think this next season's supposed to be shorter too, because it's only 8 episodes, I think, if I remember reading correctly. So I thought that was interesting, because usually like new seasons aren't that far behind the Christmas specials and stuff. Typically, obviously there are exceptions, because the last special before Jodie's final ones was like was it the Eve of the Daleks, which was like a New Year's Eve special, if I remember correctly. So that was a previous one before like her 3 specials, and then obviously the 3 specials that have was it 3 specials, or were they? No, there was 2 after. No, was it 3 after? I don't remember. Was the Eve of the Daleks one of those? I think it was one of those specials. So she had like 2 more specials after that. The Sea Devil ones and something else. Oh, the Power of the Doctor. Yeah, I think those were the 3. Either way, so. But I mean, I'm happy, like, because I was like, oh man, we're gonna have to really wait that long. But it's like, no, spring will probably be like maybe, I don't know, March or April, maybe. So not only a few more months, maybe. So probably keeping the ear to the ground to find out when the specific date is. But I'm excited to see where this next season takes us, what kind of crazy adventures end up happening with the Doctor and Ruby, and what's in store as they take this journey of discovery, and not just what they're going to see and what they're going to encounter, but also a lot about themselves, because like I said, I believe that's going to be a crux of their story going forward. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see. But yeah, I've run my mouth off long enough, but really that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good